Good evening, everyone. Today is September 14th, and this is the Community Coalition meeting. Today, our topic is Education of Our Youth, Part 2. And this is a continuation of a conversation we started a couple weeks ago, and some parents requested that we do a Part 2. I'm pleased tonight to have as our guests Dr. Leslie Torres-Rodriguez, Superintendent of Hartford Schools, Nuchette Black-Burke, Chief of Family and Community Partnerships at Hartford Public Schools, Dr. Doreen Crawford, Principal of MLK School, Martin Luther King School, and Tia Miller, owner of Creativista Charm, LLC. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. And the way we normally begin is I start off with a few questions, and then as time goes on, the other participants begin to ask their questions. So hopefully we will get everyone's questions answered. And we normally end no later than 9:15, but our goal is to end in 1 hour. So again, I'm going to begin the conversation, and I'm going to begin with our superintendent. Thank you for being here. And our first question was, how was the first day of school? And how were the students welcomed back to school? And were they excited?
So thank you again for having me. And the first day of school actually was delayed. Our first day of school was delayed given a very sophisticated cyber attack that we experienced in Hartford Public Schools and actually throughout the city of Hartford. We in the school system happen to have a shared services with the Metro Hartford Information Systems, which is an arm, if you will, of the city of Hartford, and they provide support for us around technology and information systems. And so we were, victims of a cyber attack, and it completely debilitated. We were not able to open on time, and still today we have several of our servers that are still down and impacted. So we started a day late, and nonetheless, that day that we did welcome our students, whether it was remotely or in person, there were a variety of feelings and challenges, quite frankly, that we experienced because we are still in recovery mode from the cyber attack. So lots of challenges with our students being able to connect. And those that were in person, they were excited to be there. Our staff was excited to be there. We worked diligently throughout the summer with our administrators around our protocols and procedures, safety protocols and procedures. So lots of work went on there, and we feel that we were ready with regard to the safety protocols. We just were not expecting that we were going to be, attacked in this other virtual way.
So since you were attacked that way, and we are doing online learning, what precautions have been put in place to make sure that the online learning is not disrupted?
I will tell you that our learning platforms were not impacted at all. So that's a good sign. That was the best news. We have our Google Classroom and our Seesaw platform for our younger learners. Those were not impacted at all. It was our students' ability to connect to some of the servers that we have. Those are, for the most part, been resolved. Now we have to work on, sometimes the connectivity is a little slower because we have 20,000 of us at the same time trying to access learning and trying to access the servers to, run the district. So aside from that, we're still in learning mode. This is, for example, the first time that our teachers, all of our teachers, are delivering instruction in what we call a synchronous way. In the spring, when we closed, teachers, for the most part, were delivering instruction in what is called asynchronous. That means that teachers would upload information and or their own videos and their lessons, and then students would access them, could access them at any time. This time, students are following a very clear structure schedule, and teachers provide live instruction and opportunity for students to engage not only with the adult that's delivering the instruction, but also with their peers.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to go over to Ms. Black-Burke. Since you are the person who's engaged with the community, have you heard from parents and students regarding the return to school, and do they deem it a success?
Thank you, Ms. Haldane, and good evening to everyone. So, do our parents deem it a success? That is an interesting way to phrase it. Given the cyber attack and, of course, with the delay of school, from what parents have shared with me and from the information that I've received through the Welcome Center, one thing that parents have said is that they're willing to be nimble and respond with the district. So having the information get out to families as quickly as possible as we received it, parents, they were like, okay, we're going to pivot along with the district. So that being said, yes, families have shared that, of course, if they could have found out any faster, that would have been appreciated, but they appreciated that they found out in enough time. So that's what I would say. Definitely our school administrators, the systems that we have in place to notify our parents, getting it out up on social media, parents appreciated the fact that they were made aware. So I would count that as a success, and ensuring that we had mechanisms in place that if students or families for some reason did not receive that message, we were able to redirect them and share the information with them in the moment. So as far as I would say, Ms. Haldane, again, interesting way to put it. Was it a success? I would say yes. I believe that it was a success.
Okay.
Information with our families.
Okay. I'm going to ask you if you could speak a little louder. I heard what you said, but it was kind of soft.
Oh, I apologize.
That's
I do
okay.
apologize. Okay.
So I'm just going to follow up on that. Other than the malware challenge, what do you think was the biggest challenge with the reopening?
So what do I feel is the biggest challenge with the reopening?
Yes.
And so when you refer to challenge, reopening,
The school, the kids coming back, or the first day, because we've only been in session a couple days. Or do you
okay.
think that, it's par for the course what the way things have gone?
All right. So in regards to, and when you say challenge, I guess that's the piece that I'm trying to clarify further, Ms. Haldane. You said, what do I feel is, were the challenges of reopening? I think a pandemic, lends itself to a challenge in and of itself. And the school district had their plan in place. We shared with families, we had town halls with our families to prepare them for the start of school. So I think the challenge is the pandemic itself, but also understanding that as a district, we wanted to rise to the occasion, and we did that by providing families with learning options, giving information in real time, providing town halls, the Welcome Center being open to field questions, school teachers, administrators being able to respond to those questions. So I think the challenge that we're all facing is trying to move within a pandemic in reopening schools. And that's a challenge that's across our country and very, very evident across our state.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Going to move on to Dr. Crawford. You're in a beautiful new building. And is there going to be a formal reopening of the building? And can you share with us how your first day was? because you're actually there with the parents and students. You're on mute. Can you unmute? Let me see.
Actually, our first day at MLK, the newly renovated MLK was very, very exciting. Actually, even before all of the staff came on board, we had professional development prior to the students coming in. Everyone showed up. Even some people who thought that they wanted to be remote, they were in school, ready to connect with our colleagues and also with students and families. So it was really, really exciting for us. The only thing about it is this year, because of the pandemic, we did not have Calling All Brothers, because that is usually a signature piece for us. We didn't have them this time, but I'm sure they're gearing up to join us at another time. Pure excitement. I must say, a lot of our students who thought that they wanted to be remote, when they realized what the building looked like and what was being offered, a lot of them are changing their mind alongside their parents to want to be in person rather than remote. So it's all excitement at Martin Luther King School right now, with learning, with connecting with peers, with connecting with teachers, connecting with staff. We are having a fabulous time, and we are looking forward to a wonderful school year. Lots of learning, new learning for our students and also for our staff.
Okay, can the schools accommodate all the students if all the students wanted to physically come to school? Or is there an expectation that a certain percentage will be at home?
Presently, we are expecting a certain percentage to stay home and not really connect, but eventually when that happens, we are prepared for all of our students to be in school. And I'm sure our superintendent will be able to elaborate on that, but we are ready, and we have a lot of things in place. The district has provided us with all that we need in order to be successful. We have our PPEs. We have set up our classroom because, Martin Luther King School is newly renovated. We have a very nice cafeteria with the option for students to even have lunch outside of the building on our newly in our new courtyard. So we have things in place in case more students want to be back in school in person. We are ready for that.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure who can answer this, but for students with disabilities, what has been put in place for students who have disabilities or have special needs?
I can address that. And, earlier you raised the question as to challenges, and I would be dishonest if I said that we didn't have challenges. I mean, we face challenges every single day, whether it's with a single student, a classroom at a school level, with transportation. Those happen as part of opening any school year. And we now overlay on top of that a pandemic, and then we overlay on top of that, a cyber attack. So challenges are bound. But as it relates to our students with exceptionalities, there are many things that I lose sleep over, and that is one of the things that I constantly stay up at night, because I know that for some of our students, they are not able to access the services as well as they should be remotely. I know that there are students that have complex medical needs that it's very challenging to meet those needs at home remotely. And so we do the best that we can, but we also, it's one of the reasons why we wanted to also provide in-person learning opportunities to the extent that it is safely possible, until we can no longer provide those opportunities because of the health conditions are changing, because we felt that for some of our students, it's the only way that they're going to be able to receive their services, and the only way for us in the schools to meet their individualized education plan needs. And so that still remains a challenge for us. One of the things that we're now looking to do is to look at the what is called there are some technologies, and I don't mean Chromebooks and things like that. I mean, there are specific tools and supports and technology, assistive technology that is available for our students with exceptionalities. And so we're now going to look at, can we get those technologies and resources, and how can we get those home, and how can we support our families with that added technology? It would be requiring us to do something completely different, but I also know that that's exactly what we're doing already. We're doing a lot of different things that we weren't doing before. So it is something that we're going to explore as well.
Thank you. You know, our students a lot of times are behind, and studies, or if you listen to the news, they're saying that due to this pandemic, our students of color or inner city students are falling further behind. So I would like to know, I'm going to ask someone from the school system to address that, and then I'm going to ask Ms. Miller to talk about some options available. So I'm not sure who from the school would like to address that. What can we do for our kids that are falling behind, who may fall behind? Especially since, you know, the spring, this came upon us so quickly that a lot of them were not prepared. A lot of families were not prepared for the new way of learning. What
I can add a little bit of what we are planning on doing at Martin Luther King School to meet the needs of our middle schoolers, and we have grades 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. We realize that social emotional learning is something that our students will need in order to recover from this pandemic and from being at home for such a long period of time. So working with our social workers and our counselors, we are putting in classes for them to be able to actually talk about how they feel and to bring in different resources to make sure that they can connect with themselves and with their peers and also with others, not only in person, but also online. So we are providing them with those kinds of classes and those kinds of opportunities for as a form of outlet. We are also making sure that we are there for them for whenever they have any kind of needs, whether it's emotional or otherwise. We are making sure that we have restorative practices, and it's giving our students the opportunity to connect with just about who they are. And using our social justice theme, one of the goals is to make sure that our students become advocates for themselves so they can speak out freely and make sure that their voices are being heard within the community, and they can actually advocate for what they think that they need. Too often our students, their voice is being muffled and it's not being heard. So this is one opportunity for them to actually speak out and just be heard. And that social emotional piece is a big thing, not only for students, but also for adults. As we connect with our students, we're learning a whole lot of things. Just today, there was an example of, just talking about one of the students who was not feeling like, she is making that connection. And we are going to make sure we surround her, visit her at home, and other students too, making sure that through our Google Classroom, our Google Meet, and different kinds of activities, we provide students with those kinds of outlets so they can feel included and not secluded as they have been feeling. All of us have been feeling throughout this pandemic since March, when everything was shut down. And that being shut up at home and not being, especially students who are the only child in the family or the only child at home, they are feeling disconnected from their peers and disconnected from their schools, from their teachers, and from the people who actually love and trust and they trust. So whatever we can do, we are putting those things in place. And I'm sure, it will help to heal the divide. There has been a lot of loss of learning for our students, so we are going to be very cautious in how we proceed We are making sure that we understand where they are, where those gaps are, and plug in the instructional needs that they have. Our students who are special needs students, definitely they need to be in school, like you hear the superintendent said. They need to be in school because they learn different from the rest of the students. So being able to be in school with their case manager, with their peers, it will give them that push for them to want to succeed a little bit more. So it's definitely being patient with them and making sure that we understand their needs and understand where they are so that we can support them.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Miller, you're an online learning expert. And the first time I heard the word pod was when you mentioned it. So can you talk to us about some of the ways that students can supplement their learning can be supplemented, and some of the things that lead to success for students while learning online?
Okay, thank you. So there's a new crave in America, which is called pandemic pods. I call them student pods, but they're also called pandemic pods. So basically how it works is families get together and they join a pod. So it can be between 3 to 6 students and no more than 3 families in a pod to cut down on the exposure to COVID. So the students are still enrolled in their public school. They're enrolled in their public school. However, they may have decided to completely remote learning. So once the students get together, the families will split the cost. So it's less expensive to split the cost for a teacher to come in than get a one-on-one tutor for your child. So once the students log in or they're remote, the teacher will come in and they will help students with online learning. So I started pandemic pods or student pods August 1st, and I posted a flyer to just do a pod for myself. I had a lot of friends, people in the community that were like, Miss Miller, can you come to my house? Like in March, they didn't know anything about Google Classroom or Seesaw or Zoom, and they needed help. A lot of families were working from home, or they were essential workers and they had to go outside the home and they needed help. So I said to myself, you know what, I'm gonna go out there and help a pod. However, my flyer was shared and shared and shared. Unbeknownst to me, then I had about 127 families reach out for me to help start a pod. So there are a lot of families in the community that may not be able to afford a pod because they do cost money. We do have a certified teacher that comes in and helps the students. So I have been working with nonprofits in the area to sponsor or to pay for a pod for high-risk students. I had 3 families reach out to me. One child, he is English language learner. He doesn't speak any English. And someone from the community organization reached out to say, hey, can he join a pod? So we have this student who's completely remote. He doesn't speak any English. He logs on. He doesn't know what's going on. So we're looking to have a pod with high-risk students that may not have logged in the spring. So that's basically one option is student pods. Also, as far as online learning, I also suggest to have a space in your home. So if you live in an apartment, say there's 5 or 6 people in the home, you can always designate a small corner for learning. So act like it's school. You wake up, you brush your teeth, you eat something, and you go to your corner and you log in. So I suggest to parents to still have children go to bed on time, act like it's a regular school day, even though you're working remotely from home.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to go to some of the questions in the chat because my box is filling up. One is, can the MLK principal talk about the cleaning protocol? How often will the classrooms be cleaned? How do you manage mask breaks? And are students sitting 3 feet apart or 6 feet apart? What is the protocol for the classrooms? And I assume it would be the same for all the schools in the district.
Okay, when it comes to cleaning is done throughout the day for our students. Bathrooms are deep cleaned, and classrooms and offices are deep cleaned at night. Actually, in the evening at Martin Luther King School, we have over 5 custodians who work from about 3 o'clock until 11 o'clock at night to make sure that the school is cleaned. We have hand sanitizer in all rooms and all spaces throughout. We have wipes. We have masks. Each student is given 2 sets of masks that they can wear, and they can, they can wear, and that is what the school provides for them. Every school in Hartford Public School have those masks. And actually, just before I left school today, there was also another email that was sent out for us to request whatever we need in order to make sure that our students are safe. When it comes to the classroom and the spaces, our students have at least 3 feet or more. Actually, it's more because we have our classrooms, because of the redesign, is showing a lot more space, so our students can space themselves out. When it comes to mask break, students are allowed to go outside, to go take off their mask and use a 6 feet apart to communicate with their peers, just to talk and just to, move around freely. Also, every hour, students are also given another mask break for about 5 minutes, where they can take off their mask and they can actually breathe freely. This sometimes happens in the classroom or during transition, when students are transitioning to other classroom, but every hour they are allowed to make sure, and not only the students, but also staff, teachers are allowed to take this mask break. So we are following all of the protocols. The district actually highlighted and presented us with all of the necessary protocols to make sure that our students stay safe, and also teachers are staying safe. If a student thinks that they has to have a shield, a face shield, they can have it. We have masks throughout the building, wherever they are. If there's a student who think that they need another mask, it is provided for them. So we have a lot of things in place to make sure that students are always safe, and also our staff.
Okay, thank you. Going to the next question in the chat. What are the plans that are in place to bring up test scores in reading and math? Prior to COVID, what are the plans that we now have?
I can answer the fact that at this point, we're actually trying to stabilize and get to a routine with our distance learning. One of the things that we have now been able to do, and we're actually looking for state guidance on this as well, is to assess our students. I know that when some folks hear the word assessments, that doesn't have a positive, taste. However, we need to assess where our students left off, and the gap, and whether or not that gap widened. I will just reference that, the estimate is, as it relates to the research, the estimates is that students have already lost an average of 3.1 months of learning. This is from the spring, right? Students that were remote learning, and those that are going to continue to participate in remote learning this fall will lose an average of 3.7 additional months versus those that resume in-person instruction. So if you think about it, for some of our students, not for all, but for some of our students, the impact of remote learning throughout the entire year, especially when we hear about our English learners, like Ms. Miller referenced, or our students with exceptionalities, it could be anywhere from a year to 12.4 months. So a year and a quarter. And so we need to, first and foremost, and these are conversations that we have at the state level, assess where our students are. That's also a challenge, because we know that not all of our students are in-person learning. So how do we determine what the appropriate assessment can be at home, when we know that some of our students and our families, right, are still challenged in terms of, whether or not they can support their child. So that's a piece for us that's really hard, because without knowing where our students are, it's hard for us to think about, well, what is the mitigation? How is it that we're going to close and accelerate the gap for our students? But we're gonna continue to provide the standards, whether it is remotely or in person. That's something that the expectation hasn't gone away. It's just that it looks and feels different now because our teachers are still learning how to deliver instruction in a very, very different way.
Can I add just a little bit to that? And teachers are being actually very successful with this. Our teachers have been putting in a lot of time to study distance learning and how they can connect with students. I mean, on a daily basis, our teachers are connecting not only with our in-person student, but also with our remote students, and the lessons are basically the same. A lot of baseline assessment is being done to actually, like the superintendent said, to see where our students are and to build on those. We also have in our schools, we have instructional coaches in all of the core subject areas, math, reading. We have science and social studies who are pushing in to support teachers with building instruction that is applicable to the needs of our students. And yes, we do understand that some of them, and it's not all of our students who have lost learning, because some of our students are actually doing very well on using the online platform that they have. A lot of students are gravitating towards it. And what we are doing actually in the schools is to make sure that that does not go away when it comes to students who are in person, who are doing in-person learning. They are also using their laptops to connect and to make sure that that form of learning is continuing for them. So it's not only the online students who are using their devices to making sure that they are connecting. Those students who had, all of Hartford Public School students were given a device individually. Each one had one, and they're allowed to take these devices back to school so that they can do their studies, even right there in the classroom. We have at Martin Luther King School, every classroom has a state-of-the-art smart board, and teachers are using these devices and these technology to make sure that technology is now ingrained in the instruction, in the day-to-day instruction for students. And it's not only at Martin Luther King School, throughout the district. So we are making sure we bridge that gap that we know exists and that was created because of this pandemic.
Okay, so I have two questions to follow up. One is, will the in-class teachers provide the distance learning like Jamoki is doing? And I guess that means, I guess while they're teaching in class, it's also being aired online. Does your school have that hybrid model?
If I understand the question correctly, we have teachers that are dedicated exclusively to teaching in person or teaching online. I think I understand the question. So if we have a class, a teacher does not have a split class where some students are at home and some students are in the school. We are keeping them as a cohort. And so that's a model that we decided to go by. There are, in some instances, teachers that have a class of remote learners and a separate class of in-person learners.
Yes.
At some point, will there be any analysis to see if there was a difference in the learning?
Yeah, so we are trying to be very intentional about just trying to capture as much information as possible. We're not sure what to do with it just yet, only because we're just starting and we're still trying to identify how are we going to measure, for example, attendance. The state on a daily basis sends out additional guidance and tweaks and changes to how we're going to define and collect attendance. So we're going to do the same for all of the students that were remotely or not remotely. As it relates to engagement, as it relates to submitting their classwork, there's a lot of opportunity for us to, once we get settled, to begin to look at some of the trends. Because you know, it's also an opportunity for us to learn about what can we do to improve, and what can we maximize from having a distance learning, or having all this this new way of teaching and learning, and the role that technology plays. I think there is a lot of opportunity. It's new. And so we want to be very careful that whatever new models we're able to develop, that we do that without creating further gaps, and without creating further inequity.
Okay, thank you. How is Hartford Public School handling distribution of technology for families with multiple students? And how is that working with the distance learning option? And how are these families coping with connectivity challenges with multiple students and potentially parents working from home who have to access the internet simultaneously?
So I'll go ahead and answer that question. In the spring, we distributed over 11,000 devices to families. And throughout the fall, the next few weeks, even this weekend, we were handing out devices to our families. Our superintendent was handing out devices to our families this weekend, along with other staff members. So we are looking to ensure that each student has their own device. And so we continue to receive devices across the country. If you talk to other school districts, yes, devices are like on a back order. But as a district, we are really looking to ensure that all of our students have a device. As far as connectivity issues, that is something that we discussed. We have been talking to legislators, US senators about having Wi-Fi accessible to everyone in the city of Hartford. As a district, we are working with our families. If they share with us that they are in need of a hotspot, we will provide that to them. So between principals, our family liaisons, who again are going out, gathering information from families and knocking on doors, doing home visits, doing whatever they can to ensure that students have what they need. We are looking to provide those hotspots to our families. There was a third part to the question. I don't know if I got to that part in my response, Ms. Haldane, but yes, we are providing devices to each of our students. If you have multiple students in one family, they will each receive a device, hotspots for connectivity. And again, I think all of us on this call, we just need to continue pushing that piece, that internet access is now an essential need. So we have to all work together to ensure that all of our families will receive Wi-Fi access, and really continue to work with our city officials to ensure that happens across the city.
Nuchette, if I may just put a plug here. We have not communicated this to our families, but we actually are aiming to communicate by the end of this week to distribute the iPads for our younger learners. This is something that we committed to, and we were just waiting for the iPads to arrive. We want to make sure that each and every one of our pre-K3, pre-K4, kinder, and first grader in Hartford Public Schools has their own iPad. And so we hope to communicate that at the end of this week, and have a process for families to come in and swap if they choose to. Some of our families feel like their first grader or the kindergartner can navigate the Chromebook, and that's okay. But we do want to make sure that our little ones have access to the iPads, because we know that sometimes it's easier with their fine motor skills.
And yes, thank you, Dr. Torres-Rodriguez. That's super, super important. And just saw this pop into the chat. Yes, families are being made aware of the hotspots. Dr. Crawford, I know at your school you have hotspots available to distribute to families across the district. Principals received hotspots, our family liaisons. They also have hotspots. They can reach out to the district office. So yes, families are being made aware of the availability of those hotspots.
And just to add to that, the laptops that our parents have, that we have for parents, for their students, we have brand new ones. They are already programmed and they are waiting. Actually, I have some sitting right in my office. I know parents fill out a survey, and if they cannot fill out the survey, our family resource aides are available to do it for them. Sometimes parents are challenged when it comes to doing those things, but we always have someone, whether it's the teachers or our family resource aides who are available to make sure that they put the information in and ask for what they need. Actually, I had only a few parents who indicated that they needed devices for their kids. And I asked the district for several more. I said, okay, I had 5. I wanted 25 and I got all 25. No question asked, because they know that that's something that, as the principal, I need to have it in school for those students whenever they reach out. And also, if a student has a device that is broken, that is not working, they can always come in and swap it out and get a new one. So we have those, and those are the first to be programmed by our technicians to make sure that these things are available for our students. And yes, we do have hotspots for them, for those students who might be challenged when it comes to one.
Okay, I'm gonna pause for a minute, okay? I have 24 messages in my inbox, and a lot of the parents are frustrated based on the messages I'm seeing. So I'm going to start summarizing them into categories, the ones that I've scrolled through. The first one is regarding, I'm going to say, health and safety of the students. There are questions about, are the buildings, have the HVAC upgrades been done to the buildings in the schools? And if not, when will they be addressed? And are teachers encouraged to teach outside? And if the weather is bad outside, what, I guess the students cannot get a mask break. So I'm calling those health issues. That's a summary of some. So can someone address that? Has the air filtration systems in the schools been upgraded to address COVID?
I can speak to that, and I'll also drop in the chat box a link to our website that has a list of all of the schools and the work that has been done for all of the facilities, and we update that on a weekly basis. All but I believe our 3 schools have been upgraded to the highest level of filter that is recommended. We are still awaiting some of the MERV 13 filters to arrive for some schools, but they are in progress. And what that means is that, for example, Sand School was at 20% complete with regard to the MERV 13, which is the highest. But because we're waiting for the MERV 13, we already went ahead and replaced with like MERV 10, for example, which is a little higher than the MERV 8 that we had. We're in the process of just waiting for things to arrive. Again, these are recommendations that are made. They're not requirements, but we want to make sure that we do it across our system. There are schools in which we do not have to do these specific upgrades with the filters because they have window units, and so that process is different for those schools. There was another question. I missed your other question.
Are
Oh,
teachers encouraged the mask? Yep, the mask break. And are teachers encouraged to teach outside?
Yes, we encourage teachers to teach outside. We encourage teachers to go into the open spaces. I know that Dr. Crawford, in her facility now, that's a lot of space that can be maximized in different ways. And if I understood correctly, the mask break, we want to make sure that, children get 5 to 10 minutes of a mask break. And so, we can, if the weather, for example, does not support that outside, it can be done. There are simple ways that it can be done. For example, in the classroom, if there's enough space for the students, they can, move a desk and have a 5-minute break there, mask break there. Hallway space, there's the gym space. I think the most important thing here is that, making sure that there is as much as possible that we can create the 6 feet of physical distancing to be able to, have a mask break. It is something that we have to continue to think about as, when winter time, and what would that mean for going out on a mask break. So we continue to think about that, but we know that the important thing here is making sure that we maximize, if that mask is going to come off, and we don't want the masks to come off unless it's for a break, that, we have to ensure that there's the 6 feet of distancing. The other thing is we have the face shields in case there's opportunity for a mask, and, the mask can be removed and then the face shield can be worn, just to allow an opportunity for the face to, have some fresh air. So there are different things that can be done.
Okay, this one is, I have a couple regarding students with special needs. Dyslexia, student has dyslexia, how do you address that? And then for the students who have, I'm going to say, attention learning issues that do not do well with distance learning, how are we basically addressing those special needs children? I know we asked about it, but there's a couple questions in here for more specific answers.
So I'm not sure what, and Dr. Crawford, if you want to jump in afterwards, based on your students, Dr. Crawford, that might have, the dyslexia needs. It depends on what the individualized education plan, the IEP, calls for. If the IEP calls for one-to-one support, then we arrange for that to happen virtually. If it calls for the special education teacher to support the teacher while the student is in the class, then we arrange for that virtually as well. And there's also always the opportunity for students to come in to school for in-person learning. It is a challenge that we're going to continue to have, because we saw some of that during the spring, not just we in Hartford Public Schools, across Connecticut and across the country, that we are still now delivering what is called compensatory time. That means that when students were not able to get the services because, for example, we were in distance learning, we still have to provide those services, whether they happen a month later, 6 months later. And so we're still doing that from the spring. This is very unique in terms of, a dyslexic student and their level of dyslexia, their grade level. And so without having additional information, I can only speak broadly as to how we could support the student. And the question about the attention, was it attention deficit?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. Again, not knowing what the, I don't want to go into all of the details, but when a student has attention deficit, there is what is called a functional behavioral assessment is done. That is an assessment that is done to determine what conditions have to be in place to support the student. And so that student has a plan. If that plan calls for, at times it calls for a paraeducator, at times it calls for separate seating arrangements. So I think it depends on the actual plan that the student has.
So if they have where they need somebody with them, is someone going to the home?
No.
I guess that's the question. If someone has needs that have been identified and a plan was in place, now that we're doing distance learning, is that plan still being continued? I think is what some of these questions are asking.
That plan is being continued, but virtually, unless the student is in school to access the in-person instruction and the in-person services.
Okay.
We do not have at the moment staff going to the home to deliver those services.
Okay. Here's a question. Are teachers, students, and school staff tested at some regular frequency for COVID? Are students being tested daily? Because I know on the news I've seen some kids every morning they're well, are you doing temperature check and all of those things every day?
Okay, so no temperature checks. Temperature checks, we know that a high temperature is one and not necessarily the only indicator when it comes to children. So we're not doing temperature checks. The other piece is if the question is about COVID testing, we are
Yes.
not doing COVID testing in schools. That is something that we are looking at, and we'll have more information on that at a future time. At this point, we're not ready to announce and to share any information about that because we have still a few other steps to go to explore.
Okay. Are we prepared to go to a full hybrid or complete distance learning based on the fact that we have had 2 confirmed cases?
So in terms of the cases, it is not a clearly distinct, and I'll also put something in the chat, which is the guidance that we get from the State Department of Health and the State Department of Education. Just because a person tests positive does not mean that a school has to shut down, and I'll explain. There are many factors that come into play, especially, who the student and how many people they had contact with, for how long, when they were tested, when they were symptomatic. And so there are a lot of different pieces that go into play. If and when there's a case that calls for closing a school, then we will close the school or a classroom or a hallway. There are just very different circumstances, and every case is different. The other piece to the question, if we're ready to do full distance learning or hybrid. So we did develop a plan that would take into consideration all of those. We know that potentially we in the winter, perhaps we might have to be complete remote. And so we're ready to do that if it calls for that. But right now we're still in the yellow. And so we monitor those conditions regularly. I know that last week there was a decline in the number of COVID cases, although I'm still waiting for the data in a few days because we know we had a long weekend. And so we know that the cases might have spiked a little bit.
Okay, were the teachers given instruction on on distance learning teaching? Best methods, best practices?
Spring.
Yes, and Dr. Crawford can speak to this because she's closer to it, but we started in the spring. We are fortunate that, our Hartford Board of Education approved earlier in the spring a support structure for our staff by way of a consultant that, we're experts in this work. And it was an investment that was done that we got great feedback from our teachers, and we decided to continue it again, and our board supported that work. And so we continue. It's not work that is, we know that we're all still learning, and so that support system continues for our staff. We also have, Dr. Crawford, you can speak to this. We have leads, what we call leads in every school that are, in addition to coaches, that they support teachers in each school. We call them, folks that have been doing distance learning way before, COVID happened. It was just the way of work for them. They were really versed in delivering that instruction that way.
And definitely, and I can add a little bit. So LinkSpring is our platform that we have been using since March, since the springtime, to actually educate our students on distance learning, which has been very, very successful. Teachers do have the opportunity to go on and to learn all of the platforms, all of the different methodologies that they do present for how to engage with students and how to teach students in a virtual world. So teachers have been doing that very successfully. There are lots and lots of our teachers, like the superintendent said, who have been using all of these platforms to to teach on a regular basis. So they're versed in it. In every school, there are at least 2 or 3 experts who work alongside other teachers to help them to come up to speed when it comes to distance learning and learning how to teach students most effectively online. So we have a lot of support there. A lot of our teachers are, when it comes to technology, they are technologically savvy, and they are expert at what they do. So lots of support in the school for each other. They can call each other up, and they can actually walk each other through different stages and different methods. Teachers are actually enjoying it. So within Linksbing, there are many platforms, and teachers willingly go on their own to explore, to learn, to do all of their trainings, and to make sure that they become the very best at what they do. So we are actually very satisfied with what we have. And because they have been doing it for a while, lots of teachers are self-taught when it comes to learning about distance learning and being able to deliver very effective instructions to students. They are excited about it. I've had teachers who actually come to me with things that they have learned on their own that they want to share with their peers. And definitely they're allowed to share with their colleagues the things that they have learned that are most effective. We believe in sharing best practices. So that's something that if a teacher discovers methods or different strategies that are very effective when it comes to helping students to learn concepts, then they're allowed to share it with their peers. And we welcome support and developing teacher leaders among our staff, which is something that we have been championing for years to make sure that they become leaders of their own craft.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Miller, you mentioned that you got over 100 requests regarding the pod training. Were you able to fill the need, and were you able to fill that need, and how is it going? And are you getting students from the Hartford area who might be interested in this process?
So a lot of parents don't know what pods are. I mean, like I said, it's a new crave, pandemic pods, student pods. So a lot of families aren't familiar with it. So recently I have gotten some students or families that are interested. That's why I'm partnering with Blue Hill Civic to provide a pod. So we also had individuals in the community donate money for the pod. So how it will work is the students will be provided a bus pass, and they'll also be provided lunch and breakfast. And they'll come and they'll log in, so whatever time they have to log into their classes, and then there'll be a teacher there to help. So of the 127, not very many families from Hartford have reached out, but now it seems like families are reaching out, maybe because school just started, or their child may, they're not having a good time with the remote learning. So for now, we would like to start more pods because there are families that have to work outside the home. Their child is home by themselves, or they're watching younger siblings. So we would like to start pods for high-risk students, the students that might just need a teacher there in person to help them, assist them with the remote learning.
Okay, thank you. Earlier we started off and someone talked about, I think the term was socio-emotional learning. And my question is, are the schools providing any training for the students to manage stress and anxiety? For instance, meditation, yoga, mindfulness, or are the schools even offering any physical activities so that students have a way to release some of the stress they may be having?
Okay, I can start, and I'm sure the superintendent will pick up on this. Mindfulness is something that we have been practicing in Hartford Public Schools long before this pandemic. Social emotional learning has been on our radar for a while because we realize that our students need to connect, and they need to not only connect, but connect with their emotional self. not only theirs, but with their peers and with everyone who is around them. So it's something that we have been exploring for a long time. Principals, teachers have been trained in different methods. And I talk a little bit about restorative practices. We have been doing that for a long time. We have many trainers in Hartford, in the schools, in central office who are supporting teachers in these different methodologies. Mindfulness is something that has become a way of life, I should say, when it comes to students. Students run circles every morning before we actually start. And I do this also with my staff before we start any kind of meeting, any kind of session. We have, and throughout the district, we have our morning meetings or just community meetings where we are connecting with everyone just to do a pulse check to see where everyone is, where their thoughts are, where they are, so that we can get ready for learning. So it's something that we have been championing for a long, long time.
Okay, I think I have okay, I don't know what this means. Ask when the Hartford Public School will be responding to the NAACP letter. I think I have hit most of the questions. Here's one, going back to the health and safety. Are parents asked to do temperature checks before sending kids to school?
Yes,
They are?
They are. We did share with our families, you know, things to do with their children, asking the correct questions. Are you feeling ill? Doing a temperature check, but also understanding that temperature is probably not the best indicator to be used, but definitely just asking your children how they are feeling and just being mindful, you know, where you are, what you're doing. But definitely, we have shared with parents what they can do to kind of do their own screening at home with their children.
Okay.
I do have just a few more points to add to the temperature screening. And this is, you know, based on the most current evidence and even the recommendations from the CDC. It's not recommended that universal symptom screenings happen at school. Current recommendations from the Department of Public Health at the state level is that, you know, if you do temperature screening in schools, one, it is a poor indicator of COVID infection status. Two, it creates bottlenecks, right? So you imagine 50, 100 students gathered in one place at the same time. That defeats the purpose of, right, having the physical distancing. It can have inaccurate readings, or you could potentially need a repeated testing or screening. And it can also give us false sense of security, because we know that it's just one potential indicator, and students, especially the younger ones, are often asymptomatic. It's also labor intensive. So there are a variety of reasons why we decided to go along with the recommendations from the CDC and the Department of Public Health.
Okay. Okay, Miss Beverly, do you have anything to ask? And I'm just going, do you have anything to ask?
Well, no, I don't have anything to ask, but we have had a number of questions, and I'm not sure we were able to get through all of the questions. So my suggestion is that we compile the questions that were asked in the chat box, and we'll ask the panelists
to help us with a written response so that the attendees can feel satisfied that they did get the attention and that their questions were addressed. So I believe we'll have some follow-up. I will also ask attendees if they want to send us their email. They can do that by sending it to westindiansocialclub@gmail.com, and then we'll be able to get that information out. Other than that, we will get it out online.
Okay, they can also send it to the chat, and I can give you a copy of the transcript.
Thank you.
So we will have everything. I appreciate everyone coming this evening. I appreciate people from the Board of Ed. I think that, I don't know if you are having community meetings or community discussions, or when that might occur, but it seems like there are a lot of unanswered questions, or parents have a lot of questions, so that would probably be a recommendation. And we will probably invite you back maybe in January or so, after we've gone through a couple months, just for us to see how things are going. And again, thank you everyone for coming, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Can I just add, and this on behalf of the superintendent and myself, I'm a community person. I do believe in our parents knowing what is going on. So I just think that whenever there are questions, put them out there. We're willing to answer them. And I'm sure the superintendent, now knowing that there is such a need to connect with the community, she will be making sure that she's available for more of these where, her or herself, Ms. Nuchette, and others can also answer questions and make sure that our community is comfortable with the people who they are entrusting their children with. We are here to serve, we are here to support, and we are here to make sure that our students and our young people become the very best people that they can be for our future. So that's what we do. That's the job that we do in Hartford Public School. And we are here, like I said, we are here just to serve. So thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good
Yep.
night.
Good night.